Now, let me get this right. Tourism and Film Agency is of KwaZulu Natal, right? Now, you all, as filmmakers, all remember the KZN Film Commission, and it became KZN Film. And so now what they've done is that they've merged and come together with tourism, which is a very, very interesting dynamic. And they've brought the two agencies together because, quite simply, they complement each other, right? And I always say this, if we did not have a camera, I don't think the rest of the world would know what a lion looks like, right? Okay, that's quite simple, unless the people are drawing it. So from an audio-visual point of view, no one would know what a lion looks like, what a landscape looks like. So this is kind of where the marriage comes in between. And I'm joined here today by Jacqueline, Spesihle, and Lungisi. Lungisi is a producer within KZN, and we have a locations team. We also have head of production. So we're going to have quite a quick and interesting discussion. I also have tourism here as well. If we have any questions for her, we'll also bring her into the discussion. She's snuck away. All right, so very quickly, Jacqueline, tell me about the merger. And I think from KZN's perspective, why and what do you foresee the success stories to be?
Thank you, Azania, and good afternoon, everybody. The merger had been in planning for quite a while in our province, and we're happy to report that it went through in May of this year. And as Azania said, the two industries are complementary, tourism and film, and we've seen success stories around the world where tourism-induced projects via film had been very successful. The very big examples would be around New Zealand and Lord of the Rings, as well as in Croatia and those kind of areas. And the function really of our governmental department, which is ETIA, is to ensure that economic development happens in our province as well as outside of it. So bringing two entities together where we share budgets, etc., and where we then are able to work together to impact on the ground development. We want to see businesses flourishing as well as creativity being brought to the fore. And I do think that we are the first entity in the country to merge tourism and film, so I think in that way we are a bit of a business leader. So film continues as it does, uninterrupted in the way that you know how we give film funding, and tourism then becomes a tool that assists film, that takes the strategies further. So it doesn't just stop with film productions coming to our country. We're also able to then market everything else around it, market our vendors, our business, our small business, market our crews and the depth of our crews and what we have available, market accommodations, market all of the sites that we have of importance. And ideally, we want people to come back. We want recurring business happening in our province via this tool of film. And we think that we're going to be very successful around that if we get our strategies in place, which we're working on currently, and then we'll be able to make quite an impact economically for our own citizens and outside, as also being able to talk about KZN and tell the KZN story historically, culturally, also the modern story of KZN, and then we'll be able to be impactful at various levels.
No, completely. Especially from a locations point of view, because that's been your work, and I think that you've been very successful to showcase, through fam tours, what the region looks like. And, sometimes people get it mixed up that, it's about tourism only, but yes, you go to, tourist sites, but there's also other opportunities that kind of make that particular site a beautiful backdrop for a really good story. What should we anticipate in terms of support outside of the normal funding program, and how do we see that merger become a really good support base?
Sure. So you've touched on, the tours that we conduct within the locations unit. And we found that it's become a very successful tool that we utilize in order for us to showcase our locations to film productions that are in development, are in production. But also it allows for us to integrate tourism. So when I talk about integration of tourism, is now we're able to then get tourism to be in the forefront. So they are with us at the beginning of, when we get pitches and proposals from productions that are actually wanting to shoot in the province. So outside of the funding aspect of what the filmmakers can actually get in terms of support, this familiarization tour aspect, which talks to how we can deliberately incorporate our sites into stories where we're able to have people see that KZN is actually within a film. I think Johannesburg, we have the Vodacom towers, when you go to Paris, you have the Eiffel Tower, so forth and so forth. So what we're doing now in terms of working with tourism is that we're able to incorporate very important sites that we have throughout the province. How do we then, within taking filmmakers throughout the province for a fam tour, we call it a fam tour, it's short for familiarization tour. We cover the costs of flying the key crew from parts of South Africa, so from Johannesburg or Cape Town into the province. It's basically covering the cost of a recce. And it allows the filmmaker to then eliminate that line item of, their scouting and their recceing. And this is done now in conjunction with tourism. So it allows us to weave in the story of KZN and to have our locations at the backdrop of a certain story. So further to just the funding aspect that we have within the entity, KZN Tourism and Film, we have the familiarization tours. We have the further discounted rates that we have available in terms of, the products that tourism has to showcase in terms of accommodation. We build relationships with various service providers as well. And that allows the filmmaker to be able to further incentivize their production when coming to film in the province. And this goes to transport, if you're looking for catering services. We build a large database of relationships with these service companies, and it's really promoting again the growth of the economy and really getting our services involved into the business of film and further understanding what film requires. And then also just really working with the crew members that we have in the province and just ensuring that we're able to give them access to the film productions that come to film. And this builds up skills. It allows us to also be able to play in the forefront of film productions nationally, internationally that come to film in the province.
Fantastic. Lungi, so why do you feel this is going to work? What benefit do you see having a tourism and film agency from a filmmaker's perspective?
Well, I think it's yet to be seen because it just started. From my perspective, when I shot my short film, A Better Way to Die, it was kind of challenging to actually find locations, especially I needed to film in a city on the top of a building. And another scene that was challenging was to film a skydiving scene. And but my producer was able to pull strings, but it was very separate entities that we had to deal with. But it did come together eventually, and I imagine with this merger, it will be even easier to actually access these places. And also, we are, as an emerging filmmaker as well, you are constantly being advised to actually think small, maybe even film the whole action scene in a single room. But hopefully with this merger, we can be able to actually think bigger now and have these other exotic places that Durban has to offer, KZN has to offer, being accessible to us upcoming filmmakers. So I'm very hopeful about that.
Yeah, it's perfect. 15, okay. So is there any questions at the moment that you want to ask, just let me know. Okay, there's a question over there. So can we have a microphone? There's a question here.
Hi there. Hi. Cisla, this is for you actually, I think, or maybe for Jacqueline. We have potentially a Belgium co-production that's coming into South Africa, and I would love to shoot it in KZN. The story is actually set in Central Africa, so we wouldn't be able to showcase KZN as KZN, but it's a substantial movie, and we would like to invite the DP, the producer, and the writer, who is the executive producer, to be able to actually look at the locations in KZN to see if they would marry, for Central Africa. And in that instance, you just mentioned that actually that accommodation would be covered. What would transpire with the international flights? Would they need to be covered elsewhere?
Yes, that's correct. Because our funding will only go towards local South African flights. So if they're flying from their country to South Africa, they land in Johannesburg, we can cover the cost of Johannesburg to KZN.
Patient scout as such? I mean,
Sorry, please repeat that?
do you have an actual number, like 20,000 Rand, 30,000 Rand, or whatever, 200,000 Rand, whatever it is, for the recce costs? Because obviously what we would need to do as a production company based in KZN is to, part of the quotation would to service the job, because we're a full service company, would be to advise them of what the total cost would be for a 10-day recce in KZN.
Sure, we can do those numbers for you. I mean, this is something we do on a regular basis, and it's always on a case-by-case basis. So depending on how big your project is, on how long the recce will be, we're able to crunch those numbers for you.
Okay, cool. So I would send an email through to you.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, cool.
So, I mean, as we're moving to the next question, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Tiro. I'm from Botswana. To what extent does the KZN department influence the script, ensuring that you incorporate all the key landmarks?
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to take that? Go ahead.
I guess I can take that question. Thank you, Tiro. So, we have a project, for example, I'll use the project that we have, where we, to a degree, have 100% control as KZN Film over this current project, which is different to when we have, for example, Mark talking about co-productions coming into our project where they have a completed script. They already did their location scouting, and we wouldn't want to influence their, influence them. We would rather influence them via perhaps a location scouting where we recommend locations to them as opposed to impose. But we have a district development project currently where we've gone into our districts that have been underserved over the last couple of years. And we always start with script development, which is important. We need to start with scripts for independent film, particularly. So we've got into 4 regions, and we've, as part of a mentorship program, mentored first-time filmmakers who would otherwise not have access to these kind of services unless we go to them. And we start off with consultations with the community. We go to the community via their municipal authorities and, kind of speak to what it is that they want to do. So at that point, where we have a level of control, we would then say to the community, bring your locations in. We want to see very specific examples of how Ilembe is going to look, how Mzunyati is going to be represented in the script, either via using the locations as real locations, the Mandela capture site, for example. It can't be anything but the Mandela capture site. You can't really, then also using your own locations where you rent your own homes, you rent your own shops for the use of the shopping, so the money gets circulated in. So with production funding, where the producers come with their concept already realized, we wouldn't want to influence them. We would just say, listen, use our locations. 50% is our rule. You have to spend 50% of your budget here. But with projects where we do want to influence it almost 100%, then we would be very specific about what it is that we want to do. I hope that answers the question.
Is there any other questions? All right. So I think then, from a producer's point of view, what additional support do you think you would want? I mean, we have funding, we have production funding. There's funding for you to travel to different areas. But now we have this merger. What other suggestions can you make? Now we're all seated here to say, okay, as a producer and from the private sector, this is actually what I want to see from this.
KZN does the Tourism and KZN Film Commission. Am I saying it right? Authority, yes. They do actually offer a lot of assistance for emerging filmmakers to actually propose their projects to them. And what would be great with this is that they actually, while we're in development, they can actually pre-suggest what locations that could work for certain scenes, actually, and even try to advocate for those to be actually featured in a certain story. So I think someone who, I'm glad that they're actually, that they are merging. Yeah. And it's just going to make it much more easier. Yeah. And I just want more accessibility to locations, exotic locations. More accessibility. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, there's ideas and we, maybe from a funding point of view that, maybe strategies of establishing specific funds around the use of locations. So you have a minimum threshold of the top 100, you have to use 10% of that or 5%, and you have to name them. Because then what that then does, obviously, it assists the viewer to identify immediately what that road is, what that hotel is. So I think also producers always ask government must ask you, be very specific about and intentional about the location, if at all you can. In the instance where the gentleman has got an international film, he's a cheap location, it's impossible to do that. But then tourism, you can then bounce off and say, well, it was shot here. This is how you can change do a shoot, cheap location.
There's so many other places that we actually don't know about KZN. Even though I'm from KZN myself, they could actually suggest, what about this place that could actually suit you? That would be very, very helpful, actually.
No, indeed. So I think maybe we're wrapping up now. Jackie, on your side, what message do you want out there in terms of the merger and why it is going to work, why it is working?
I guess what I could say in answer to that is that we would like, as you've encouraged the audience, for you to consider and come with us with ideas. Yeah. We want the input from our filmmakers. We want to be able to help you. It's something that we're currently doing. Setai and I are working on a project where a filmmaker came to us and said he wants his below the line reduced. So he wants to take off some of the accommodation and some of his flights, etc. And we found it's not just a simple thing of handing over the MOU agreements to them. We actually have to sit down and strategize together as a team to be like, okay, this is our tourism offering. This is our X offering, our K whatever, and how much can we actually remove from it? How do we do that? What do you give in exchange for our service providers? How do you integrate their branding into the film? How do we promote it as tourism that this is happening? Our marketing team asked for very specific locations to be represented. And so we're talking about that, and so it's a new ground for us, and it does mean that we, as Tourism and Film Authority, are now much more involved. It's forced us to be much more involved as opposed to just hands off, and it's become a very, very interesting way of working with our filmmakers. And I think that will be our success, that we're now doing this thing where we're not this combative entity, where we're not giving enough money. You know, that's always the story. We're taking too long to issue funding. Now we're actually doing something where we are willing to be very open and clear about them, about the how of it. We're now operating in an operational space as opposed to an administrative space.
100%. So I think on that note, we've run out of time completely. We've run out of time completely. There's one more question. So he is going to bring the film to KZN now.
Yes.
2 questions deep.
Thanks for giving me this moment. You know, the interesting thing is that I didn't start my career in Cape Town, but I spent a lot of time in Cape Town. And I watched how Cape Town as a city developed over 10 years and how it has 35,000 sustainable employees in the film industry in Cape Town. And it was down, there was no film commission. The film commission was 3 people.
Yeah.
First it was Martin Cuff. You know, before that it was a lady called Pinky.
Yeah.
Then it was Martin Cuff, then it was Dennis, and the staff was never bigger than 3. And what they did is they did exactly that. They integrated, they trusted the producers, they worked with the producers, and it was the producers, and there were just a handful. I mean, I wasn't really one of the players. There was a generation ahead of me that I learned from, and I saw how they built the Cape Town film industry. It started with stills, and there was Ken McKenzie, there was Philip Key, there was Moonlighting that's now been purchased by Chappie. So those companies started from the ground up. I mean, Mnet gave Moonlighting their first flights to Germany to go and actually pitch their first project. I remember Philip, who's a friend of mine, telling me that Mnet had actually paid for the flight. He was so thrilled. So, you know, I think that what's happening is remarkable, and I think it's fantastic. And I think, from my perspective, I'm seeing the possibility of the same thing happening that's happened in Cape Town 15 years ago, happening in KZN. I really believe KZN is a fantastic location. Yeah, well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for that, Mark.
from your lips to God's ears. Thank you very much from my panel, and we wish you all the best with the authority. Thank you so
very
much.
much.